welcome to Neuqua Connection. I'm your host, Eva Topolewski, and today we have Rob Elgis from ABC7.
Thanks for having me on this special day, the birthday of a Mr. G.
So what is your job at ABC?
So I am a reporter and an anchor at Channel 7 here in Chicago. I anchor the 4 o'clock news, so when the live audience gets home today, they can watch our broadcast from 4 to 5. And then I go out and report for the 10 o'clock news. So I'm called general assignment reporter, so I'll go out and tell various stories, whatever's really kind of happening in the community that day.
Do you have a preference over anchoring or reporting? And is there an aspect that appeals to you more?
I think they're very different in their skill sets. You sit on a set like this when you're anchoring, you're reading from a teleprompter. Those are words written by other writers and producers. I think that's a little bit different than going out and reporting. When I'm out live reporting in the field, I'm writing all those stories myself. I'm doing the interviews like you're doing today. And then I put that story together on a pretty tight deadline. Yesterday I did a story about a Uber driver or a Lyft driver who was accused of a crime, and it happened a few days ago, and we got out there at 7 o'clock, and I had about 2 hours to do that story for the 10 o'clock news. That deadline is a lot different when you're a reporter than when you're anchoring.
So would you say having a deadline is one of the biggest challenges of your job?
For sure, yes. I think a deadline, whether you choose to be a producer or a director or a writer in this business, as you guys know, taking classes here at Neuqua, you have a deadline for Wildcat Weekly, right? It may be for the week, or it may be for 2 weeks you work on a story. But I think if you want to be in this business, whether you're on camera or you're not, you've got to be able to handle that deadline. And I think that's where you really kind of see who could maybe do this and who can't. How are you under pressure? This is tough right now. This is live. It's taped. You only have one chance to really get it right, and there's some pressure involved. And so I think you got to be able to handle that.
So kind of going off of that idea, have you ever been on air and messed up or something went horribly wrong?
It happens. It's live television. There's no delay. So if you see me tonight on the set as I'm speaking, there may be a slight delay if you're watching on cable. But yeah, I mean, we're human. You make mistakes. You may stumble on your words. You may lose your train of thought. I always have notes like you do right now. I can look down at those notes when I'm out in the field on the story I've covered. But I think we're going to make mistakes because we're people, and I just try and rebound from that when I'm live on the air if I stumble or I say something, and just keep going. The best thing to do is just keep going.
So when you go live, do you generally have an idea of what you're going to say, or have you ever just gone completely off script before?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the story. If I show up at a scene that's really active, let's say there's a fire at a school here in Naperville, and we arrive on the scene and the building's on fire. My job is to immediately just start gathering details from the people who are there. And so I'm jotting down notes there, but a lot of times I'm just going from what I've seen and what I've experienced. The stories that you see in the studio are a little more scripted, and that's when you get a chance to write the story. You log your interviews, you kind of come up with a plan within that story. So it just depends on the situation, but I always have a notebook. You always want to have something to take notes. You always want to have something that allows you to, in case you mess up on the air or you freeze up, and we freeze up, right? You can look at that and reference that and be able to go to that when maybe you freeze for a second.
So obviously your job's a lot different from other jobs, being that you have to be on air and seeing a lot of people. So when did you know you wanted to be on TV?
I think it was not until I was in college. You guys are ahead of the game. I think if you're sitting out in this crowd, you have a general interest in what I'm doing, right? Or you have a general interest in these cameras. And I think a lot of you are ahead of where I was. It was for me when I went to college and I was writing for the student newspaper, and then I realized, wait, I could take a camera with a microphone and I could go out and tell stories visually, with audio and natural sound, and that was just that was a poignant moment for me where I thought this is what I want to do. I couldn't sit in an office all day. I have to go out. I think I meet new people every day, and it's a really, really great experience.
So do you think one of the aspects that most intrigues you is storytelling?
Yeah, I think so. I think storytelling is important to me. I think when I can tell stories that can connect people with certain humans in this world, when we can do good in broadcasting, because I think a lot of people are pretty soured on our business, and when we can go out and tell a story that can compel people to help maybe a disabled child, or can help raise money for a family that needs it, or we can help tell stories about things that are happening in the city that are not just. We have a really important role, and I try not to take that lightly. And I think that's really important for us right now, because a lot of people, they don't really care for the media right now.
So obviously Chicago is a large market for news. How do you work your way up to getting here?
I think it's changing a lot. I think for you guys, you're a junior and there's some freshmen in here. There's a couple of coworkers I have who are 24 years old. They're on TV. They're doing stuff for our web-based product. And back maybe 10 years ago, I would have told students like you have to pay your dues, you certainly have to go to college to get a degree. But it's changing so rapidly, you may find success in the next 6 or 7 years in a market like Chicago. And I wouldn't have said that to you 10 years ago. It is really changing rapidly, and the skills you guys are learning here now are going to create great opportunities for you. But to answer your question, I worked in El Paso, Texas after Champaign-Urbana, and then I came back here to Chicago in 2002. I've been here now 17 years, a long time.
So you think that your steps to get here to this point will be a lot different from like a student my age?
For sure, I do. I think what you're doing and what you're creating, whether it be on Wildcat Weekly or what you're editing, I watched Perrin's YouTube. He was great. This was this natural way to review something he had a passion about.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And he's in the crowd today. Thank you. You're welcome. But he took something he's good at and he has an interest in, and that can be on television, whether it be on YouTube or be on ABC7 or Channel 5. It's evolving, and all those skills you guys have, I don't know where it's going, but there's a need for this kind of information, and I think all of you will have an opportunity to do that in some way, whether it be on that phone, whether it be on a computer, or be on television.
So like with the industry changing, like you just talked about, do you have any responsibilities on social media?
Oh, that's a good question. All of you have Instagram accounts, right? All of you are probably on Twitter. You are on Instagram, right? I mean, how many followers do you have? A couple thousand maybe,
yeah.
Right? I mean, there are times when you're sitting there and you want to send something or you want to tweet back at someone, and you have to have restraint because the words you're putting out there now are going to be there in 10 years when you're a professional like me out in the world. And I think social media is critical to connect to people, but you have to have restraint. And be aware that you might be a teenager now, but when you're 26 years old instead of 16, people are going to look at that stuff, and they're going to remember it.
So I've seen your Twitter, and I know you get trolled a lot. How do you deal with that?
It's hard. I mean, especially you guys see this in high school as bullies, or even if it's a friend that you know who's just going to take a dig at you because you went to the beach and you posed in a bikini with something that they thought was stupid. They're going to troll you. They're going to go at you, right? I block most of the people who troll me. That there's something liberating about that. Just block them. But I've tried not to engage with them, and that's really hard. And I can't imagine being your age having to face that, because your natural instinct is to tweet back. But I guess I would say, if I have about 20,000 followers, which isn't a lot on Twitter, but would I say that in front of a live audience in a packed house, the United Center full of people? Would I tweet that or grab a microphone and say to you, "You're an idiot for not agreeing with me"? I wouldn't, right? And so I think you can put yourself and say, would I tweet that to my classmates if they were standing here staring at me right now? I bet you wouldn't,
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard. Yeah.
So like when you're in the public eye, it seems like everyone's watching you, and it seems like you have to have pretty thick skin. How do you deal with some of the traumas that you cover? Like, do you take that home with you, or do you just like leave it at work?
Both. I think I come home a lot, and you're going to meet my wife, who is also in the business, is a great, and your mom. She's a great resource to be able to come home and just talk about what happened, on the phone or whatever it might be, to discuss the day's news. It's important to talk about it. I think it's important for me to talk about it, and whether it be with my coworkers or whether it be with someone at home, we cover a lot of bad stuff, a lot of crime, a lot of murders and fatalities, and those are hard to cover, and talking about it helps. Yeah.
So kind of on a different note, what's been your favorite story that you've covered?
Boy, that's an easy one. The Cubs, 2016 Game 7, Cleveland. I was there, and I was on the field, and it was the greatest experience of my career. That was a hard one to answer because I've covered a couple Olympics. I was in Russia, I was in Italy, covering those games. But to be there for Game 7, representing our city for Channel 7 was just amazing. I mean, it's not even close. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you do What would you tell a college or high school student that wants to go into the business?
Keep pressing. Keep working at it. Get better. Take critiques. I just met with. I was just telling your mom. I had a talent coach. You know, here I am. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I just sat down last week with someone who critiqued my reporting and said, "Why are you saying this? You're furrowing your brow, or why are you writing this and using pronouns?" And keep getting better. Take critiques. It's hard to do. If people tell you you suck, maybe think, well, do I suck? You know, I mean, question your abilities, take critiques, and always look to get better. I'm always striving to get better.
Well, thank you for joining us today. You can catch Rob on ABC 7 at 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. And that's all for Neuqua Connection.